Welcome to the Avatar series, part number 7. Today we will discuss the pastimes of Maharaj Prithu or King Prithu. I will just shortly chant a few mantras for auspiciousness. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschayadishatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The pastimes of Prithu Maharaj are to be found in the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the Srimad Bhagavatam 4th canto also informs us about the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj, many might be familiar with it, is a Kshatriya, also a king, who in the age of 5 years went to the forest to seek out the Lord based on being humiliated or hurt by his stepmother, and he became a great devotee. And of course, then since he became a great devotee, his line or I would say family tree became very famous. Dhruva Maharaj saw the Lord face to face. He also got the blessing to rule the earth for 10,000 years, and he ultimately even got his own planet, which is known as the pole star. So, and then the dynasty of Dhruva Maharaj is also stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 4th canto, and in this line we find also King Prithu or Prithu Maharaj. From Dhruva Maharaj came, after a few generations, the personality Maharaj Anga. Maharaj Anga was also a great devotee, a very special soul, and out of some reason he got married to the daughter of Death personified, Sunita. So Maharaj Anga married Sunita, and out of their union came a son called Vena. And King Vena was a very cruel person. And this was due to his coming from Death personified. Death personified was his grandfather. And it said he turned in this direction. He became a follower rather of his grandfather. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining how it works, that how does a son become according to the parent, to the mother or father. He explains this hereditary laws in terms of what you take with you from your parents. So it was said because of the mother, King Vena became a very cruel person. He exhibited his cruelness, for example, by unnecessarily killing animals in the forest, even when he was a child. For Kshatriyas or like the kingly class, it is common or was common that they hunt in order to train skills. There was one part of it. And for the other part, to regulate also the animal population, because it can be that they overpopulate, or someone has to take care of that also, as it is nowadays. So, but King Vena was very cruel. He liked to kill for the sake of killing, and doing it also very cruel, not just killing one shot, but hurting and then killing. And he also treated his own playmates like this. It is explained that he played with the boys the same age and then in a cruel way killed them. And of course, Maharaj Anga was not just sitting there and looking. He tried to punish Vena and tried to rectify him, but it was without success. It was just too strong in him. The evil in King Vena was too strong somehow or other. And Maharaj Anga became very disappointed and very, how to say, he lost all taste for his position, for his kingdom, for his fatherhood. And he actually decided to leave family life, we could call it prematurely, out of disgust, because with that son, he lost all inspiration to continue his material life. And it said even one night, in the dead of night, with no one noticing, he escaped, so to speak, in the forest, and he dedicated himself to spiritual perfection. And he was not to be found. So everyone was looking for him, but he was not to be found. And a bit before that, let's hear a bit about how Vena also took birth. The story of King Anga is interesting. He had somehow or other some let's call it bad karma, or like there was quite some unfortunate energy in his life. He was, for example, cursed by his own karma to not beget a son. Actually, he performed once an Ashwamedha sacrifice, which is a great horse sacrifice, and no one of the demigods showed up, which is astonishing, because usually it's such a sacrifice, and it was a great devotee, and usually all the demigods, they assemble and they take their share and then they give the blessings. Ashwamedha sacrifices are considered to be so-called karma kanda, which means fruit of activity. You get something in return, you expect some material benefit from it. So, and since no one came, everyone was astonished. Also the great sages and priests, they considered and contemplated what was happening. They couldn't find any fault, neither in King Anga nor in the sacrifice. All the ingredients were carefully, brought by King Anga, and also in his mind, in his personality, no sin could be found. And then they figured that in a past life, King Anga had acted sinfully, and as a result, we would be without a son. At the same time, the sages became compassionate, and they offered to perform an additional sacrifice or yajna for the pleasure of Vishnu, so that Maharaj Anga would obtain a son, because they figured, well, Vishnu is the Supreme Lord, and if he's pleased, everything is possible. So they did so, and the yajna was successful, and out of the yajna fire came a shining personality in a white dress and with the golden garland, with a golden pot. And in this golden pot, there was rice boiled in milk, was Mahaprasadam, so to speak. And this prasadam was handed to King Anga. And Anga was said to be very liberal, which is explained by Srila Prabhupada's purpose. He did not really consider the qualification of his wife in terms of motherhood. I mean, she was the daughter of death personified. And he gave her part or half of the offering to eat. So after that offering, she got pregnant, Sunita, the wife, although she wasn't actually a fit candidate. So in this way, King Vena was received in the dynasty of King Anga, although it said to a half, he's actually part of the dynasty of irreligion. This is how the Srimad Bhagavatam is translating that. So as we heard, he was a very cruel person, and Anga got quite tired trying to rectify him without success, and then left the kingdom. Of course, a kingdom cannot work without a king. So what happened, as soon as the king, it was known that the king disappeared, all the criminals like thieves and robbers and all, they flourished. They came out of their hiding, so to speak, and it was very difficult. So the sages decided to install King Vena as a king. Although all the ministers, everyone disagreed, because they figured, I mean, he's such a cruel person, he will just ruin everything. And at the same time, someone had to, sit on the throne, and he was the only son, and it was actually by law, he was entitled to get the throne. And although he's described as being very severe and cruel, he still had one positive effect on his, kingdom. all the criminals, the thieves and the robbers and so on, they were afraid of him and they were in hiding. So to say, the greater evil, how to say, kept the lesser evil in check. King Vena was so powerful and cruel that no thieves dared to do anything, because they would be definitely severely punished. At the same time, what happened, King Vena became very intoxicated by his position, and it is said the king actually is a representative of the Supreme Lord. This is upheld in Shastra, and he also, in him or within his body, all the demigods reside. And one day the sages came to speak to King Vena in a respectful way. They were angry, but at the same time they left their anger aside and respectfully approached the king. Because what was happening is that King Vena, intoxicated by his own pride, he like it said, like an uncontrolled elephant, went through his own kingdom and caused quite some disturbance. And he also forbade all yagyas, all Brahminical activities. So he was practically ruining the foundations of Vedic culture or society. So they addressed it and they tried to instruct him, change his mind so that he, does not act in that way. But King Vena completely dismissed them, regarded them as children who were immature, and accused them of envying him. And he then said, he used this kind of understanding that the king is an embodiment of the demigods. He assumed he's the Supreme Lord, actually. And he, very clearly and directly established himself, actually, I'm the Supreme Lord, and you should do just my bidding instead of, or like my will, instead of envying me. And this gave a lot of pain to the sages, to the Brahmins. They were heartbroken, it was said, by the complete dismissal and respectful treatment of King Vena. And they decided to kill him. They cried out, hey, he has to be killed. He is the worst offender, and he will just bring ruin to everyone. So what they did is that it said with high sounding words, they killed him. And there's the term hum, or like it's a syllable that is used. Some sounds with hum. Like in some mantras you also find in the Simhadev mantras, they include this word a lot, hum, which is for protection and destroying enemies. And so in a particular sound, in a particular pitch, so to speak, they were capable to kill King Vena with the sounds. And this was one rare example how sages or Brahmins interfere in the course of society, because they don't consider it usually their business. They're compassionate and they might interfere, but it's not their task. They have the power, but they can't do so. So they killed King Vena, and his mother Sunita was very, of course, aggrieved. And what she did is she decided to preserve the body, and she applied certain mantras and herbs. Obviously, there was knowledge of how to say mummification or conservation of the body, and so King Vena's body was still around. It was not burned as it would be tradition, particularly in the Vedic times. So what happened then? King Vena being dead, the thieves and the robbers or the criminals, they felt encouraged again to rise. And one day the sages noticed that in the land, so it's just described like this in the Bhagavatam, they saw like a dusty cloud, a big cloud coming toward them or like bypassing them. And it were all the thieves and robbers who were very active plundering the citizens. So of course that was another trouble, and the sages decided out of compassion we got to do something, because we cannot just bystand. So what they did is they then took the body of King Vena, and there was a consideration. They said, actually, King Anga's line, or like his, should not stop. The semen in this line is very powerful because it comes from Maharaj Dhruva. So actually, the line was very pure. And in King Vena's case, it was said the purity or the power was kind of overshadowed or like polluted by Sunita, being the daughter of death personified. So what I first did is they applied a process. It's not explicitly mentioned how exactly all this process in this totality went, but they churned the legs of the body first, which is looks first sounds like a kind of really strange. What, you churn the body of a corpse, and then in order to produce life. Srila Prabhupada also argues that actually it's not so unbelievable, since what happens when man and woman unite, also semen and an egg cell come together, the combination of material elements by the power of the spirit produce a body. So it could be also achieved in other ways if the same core ingredients would be there. So just the knowledge of it must be there also. So, and the legs are considered, if you take the example of society, the legs are the Shudras. They are in a mode of ignorance, whereas the arms are the Kshatriyas, or like the body, the stomach is the Vaishyas, and the head are the Brahmins. So they churned the legs first, and out of it came a small being, which was completely black. It said he had really short limbs. He had huge jaws, like a flat nose, and reddish eyes, and copper hairs. And he was called Bahuka. And he was practically the personified sin or sins of King Vena, which was churned out of his legs. And he was very meek and humble, it said. And he approached the sages in a very humble position. Okay, please tell me, sirs, what shall I do? And then they told him, Nishida, which means like sit down. And then Nishada, or like he was named Nishada, and Nishada rays coming from him. And he, it's said, took care of all the sinful reactions of King Vena. And it said he became a tribe, which is also referred to as Kiratas. And they are very sinful. They are robbers, thieves, plunderers, and criminals in different ways. And the purports explain how they actually were not allowed to live in cities, but rather in the mountain regions. So in this way, King Vena's body became purified. So the very inauspicious effects of Sunita's heritage became transformed, and now they churned the arms of King Vena in the same mystic process. And then out of the arms represent also in the body of society, the Kshatriyas. A couple came, a male and a female. And the male was called Prithu, and the female Archie. And also the sages could immediately understand, okay, the male one is a plenary portion of Lord Vishnu, which means that he's not Vishnu himself, but an empowered jiva, where Vishnu invested his Shakti. And Archie was a partial, or like also in Shakti Avesha, a jiva invested by the Shakti of Lakshmi Devi, the eternal consort of Vishnu. And the name Prithu also means someone who like is expanding, or like it said expanding his fame all over the world. So Prithu is the one who made the earth, how to say, fertile again. I think fertile is the right word, because the earth was then at some point not giving any food grains and any herbs. So they were manifested from this body, and I can show you a nice illustration on that also. Just give me a second. Yes, I will come to that. So here we have the image of, we see here King Vena, his dead body lying there, and there are the sages around, and they recognize how King Prithu and Archie are manifestations of Vishnu and Lakshmi Devi. And we see also here on the side there's Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma also came down because here all the demigods then surrounded the event, because they were aware here that Vishnu came in order to interfere with the situation. And it is explained that they recognized King Prithu as a Vishnu avatar, or like in Shakti Vishnu avatar, like we must correctly say, a living entity who was empowered by Vishnu Shakti, were certain features of his body. And some features are the lines in the hand, or also on the feet, you know, on the how to say, the palms is for the hand, and I don't know what you call for the feet. And Brahma came down and he recognized that there was, I have to find it again. Yes, lines of Vishnu's palms on Prithu's right hand. So like this looked like the same lines Vishnu has on his palm, also on Prithu's hand, they were visible. And also impressions of a lotus flower on the soles of his feet. These are some symptoms of an godly avatar, like an incarnation. And it said here also in the verse, one whose palm bears the sign of a disc, as well as other such lines, should be considered a partial representation of the Supreme Lord. And this is something Srila Prabhupada often, if it comes to avatars, points out. He says if someone poses as an avatar or an incarnation of God, there must be signs visible like that, for example, on his body. There must be features that are mentioned in Shastra. You also find for Krishna and other forms there are many lines, particular lines. There's a symbol, for example, an elephant rod. There's a thunder and an umbrella, and they mean different things. It said the elephant rod, for example, on Krishna's, I think was it on the feet or hand, but on his body, means, for example, he's the control of the mind. The elephant is compared to the mind, and the elephant rod is Krishna, is controlling the mind. And there is also the thunder, which is representative of Krishna also crushing the false ego and so on. So all these symptoms are there, and they look quite exactly like that. They're not like kind of how to say, blurred kind of symbols that could be interpreted as this and this and that. No, they're rather pretty clear impressions. So Prithu Maharaj also wore like some of these signs, and in this way was recognized as a Vishnu avatar, Shakti Avesha avatar, with empowered Vishnu Shakti. There was one question concerning what is the difference between Krishna avatars and Vishnu avatars. In a sense, none. We always hear that also in the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada uses Krishna and Vishnu synonymously, that they are actually not different or the same. From our avatar series, we learned that there is a categorization of avatars according to qualities and features. Since Krishna is Swayam-Rup, he possesses all qualities to the full extent. His original form is two-armed, playing flute, and so on. Whereas Vishnu differs in terms of qualities. From the 64 possible qualities, he has 60. And to a lesser degree than Krishna, there might be some just insignificant, some significantly different. And his expansions then are like more of the Vishnu Tattva or category of Vishnu. This also relates to the type of pastime they perform. Vishnu is particularly in charge of the material world. The Vishnu avatars are the ones in the pastime of creation. We covered it more extensively. Mahavishnu, Garbhodakasha Vishnu, Kshirodakasha Vishnu. They are responsible for the creation of the material world and for maintaining it, and also for destroying it. And in due course, the Vishnu, which is within the universe on the milk ocean, or Kshirapti Shaya Vishnu, he said he's the source, or like through him, all the avatars enter the universe in order to perform their pastimes. They originate in Mahavishnu. In a sense, it's not much difference, because Mahavishnu and Garbhodakasha Vishnu, in Tattva, they're all one. So, and Krishna sometimes comes as original Krishna in order, and once in the day of Brahma, to enter the material sphere. But otherwise, he said he's always in Vrindavan, he never leaves there. And we also heard last time, I think it was, that when it only comes once in Brahma's day, which is a long period of time, a lot of yuga cycles. We heard that there are 1,000 yuga cycles for one day. So it's also explained that the other Krishnas that come in that time are actually expansions of Mahavishnu. So he can also manifest Krishna. He's then not the Vrindavan Krishna, but another Krishna, like this. So Krishna is the origin of all the avatars. He's called the Avatari, and the others are the avatars emanating from him for different purposes and pastimes. All right.
Sorry, another question as usual. So sorry, because I missed the first like 5-10 minutes. But which yuga does this Prithu Maharaj belong to, or does
That's
he
an,
form?
yeah. Actually, I didn't really got that information. I would assume that it's somewhere in Treta or Dwapara Yuga, but I
Because
didn't.
he's a human form, isn't it? Not like animalistic. So surely
Yeah, he's
it's
human.
towards the later.
Yes, he is in his human form. I must speculate, but assume he's in Treta or Dwapara Yuga, one of these two. Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So his appearance is something unique in terms of that he came actually from the dead body of King Vena being churned out of the arms of King Vena, whereas the sinful activities were churned out of the legs of King Vena, and the whole tribe, Nishada tribe, was being born from there. Also, one other criteria for recognizing an avatar is always if you particular consider the human forms, that there are parents to be mentioned in Shastra. We heard it also when there was Vamana Dev and when there was Ramachandra and so on, that always there are parents, there's a place of birth that is mentioned in Shastra, plus that this personality bears particular signs in terms of physiognomy, that you have certain lines, certain symbols, and so on. So Maharaj Prithu performed quite a few pastimes, which are like all explained in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He covers, or like his pastimes cover quite a few chapters. And after he appeared, of course, there was time for the coronation. And also for this, I would like to share with you second. A slide, because there's some nice illustrations here. So here you see quite a few personalities gathering around King Prithu and Archie Devi. And we see here up on the right is Lord Shiva handing a sword, which is marked with 10 moons. What we do not see is that there also the descriptions tell of way more personalities than are depicted here in this image. But there is also Durga Devi, who gives him a shield which is marked with 100 moons, for example. On the left, we see Vishnu himself came to give presentations to Prithu Maharaj. This is always common, particularly if an avatar is coming. All kinds of living entities gather whatever is their capacity. They gather presentations to please or to welcome the Lord in that sense, or the king. So Vishnu came and he handed him a Sudarshan chakra. Srila Prabhupada explains that this must be understood in the context of his being a Shakti Vesha avatar. It's not the original Sudarshan chakra to its full capacity. It's according to the Shakti that was invested in King Prithu, that also the Sudarshan chakra had a certain amount of the capacity it has when it is in Vishnu's hands. So with Lakshmi Devi, we also don't see. She was also there. She is said that she gave him unlimited or imperishable opulences. And the throne that he's sitting on is said as a golden throne. This was given by Kuvera, who is the treasurer of the demigods. He's also not visible in the picture as far as I can tell. Visible in the pictures are, for example, here on the left, it said this is Vayu, the wind god, and he gave 2 whisks of hair, or this chamara fans. That was his presentation. Then we have, actually here you see this pillow, and there are slippers on it. Here a male is depicted or like painted as the person who gives it, but actually it said it's Bhumi Devi, the personified earth, who handed over slippers full of mystic power to King Prithu. And these slippers had the effect that when he would enter them, he could just walk anywhere he wanted in an instant, kind of by mystic power. With this slippers, they carried him wherever he wanted. Then we have also, you see, he already wears a scepter in his hand. So this was given by Yamaraj. Actually, it's the king of death, or like the lord of death. And we also have then Dharmaraj, or Dharma, the personified religion, who we see down here with a garland. A garland that expands the fame of King Prithu. And then we see here, on the right down, there is Suryadev handing bows made from the horns of goats and cows. Oh no, sorry, I was mistaken. Surya hands arrows as brilliant as sunshine, and next to him is Agni. You see him here, it's a bit hidden. He has a bow that is made from the horns of goats and cows. It's one of the weapons that will also be present in his pastimes. You see also here a helmet, and that was given by Indra. Yes, so all the personalities visible here have been mentioned. Chandra gave him horses that were made of nectar. Chandra is the moon god. And so many personalities presented so many gifts to King Prithu for his coronation. So in this way, King Prithu was welcomed. And as next it is described that he was praised by so many singers, as it is common. Also, we know that perhaps from our history, and maybe if you go a few centuries back, it was always common that the bards and those who play instruments, they praise the kings or those who are of royal order. And the praises are not necessarily facts. They are also, some etiquette. Let's call it like this. The king is to be praised because he represents a certain personality, a certain ideal, a certain maybe even archetype. So he's praised with so many songs. And so we could say it is assumed that he is that, although he might not necessarily manifest that. And King Prithu told them, don't praise me for things I haven't done yet. So he was very sober and down to earth, saying, okay, praise would be proper if I would have shown all these qualities, done all these deeds that you praise me for. So please don't praise me for what I haven't done. So that's also an interesting look at that you should not be prematurely, praised for things that one hasn't done, but like one should first show that one is capable of doing them. Okay, then it went on. Since the situation was this, King Vena was there. King Vena did not, contribute in a good way to the kingdom. Then he died, and there is a lot of damage in between. Means since King Vena stopped all kinds of sacrifices, brahminical activities, and so many impious kings also around King Prithu, he was the emperor then. They of course did not necessarily obey Vedic laws and custom. So the earth was not giving food grains, or at least not to that capacity she was supposed to. And then the citizens came to King Prithu and shared how they suffer from hunger, how they starve, and that they became very thin already, and that they are concerned that they will simply die from hunger. And I said King Prithu contemplated for a long time for the cause of that, why is there no food grains? And then he concluded that it is because of the earth not wanting to give it. Because then since King Prithu was there, and then also all the activities of the Brahmins and so on, they continued. So his point was, no, the earth has to be forced now to hand out the herbs and grains. We will hear that actually the herbs and grains are not the property of the earth, or not, so to say, the origin, although that is usually, probably one would assume that, but actually they came first from the creator Brahma. Brahma created all the seeds, he created all the grains, because it is said he manifested the planets. This is his power. Brahma is a very powerful demigod, and he created not just the planets and all the how to say, flora and fauna. So he also created all living entities, and the earth was actually only entrusted with the herbs and grains. It was not hers to necessarily decide or like to administrate according to her discretion. So King Prithu took up the bow and the arrows that we saw before, also in the picture, and very angrily went to chase the earth. When the earth, or like Bhumi Devi, was noticing that, she assumed the form of a cow, and she was very afraid of King Prithu, and she ran away. And this we can see here in another illustration. So here is the famous picture where the earth assumed the form of a cow, because also her thinking was, okay, if I'm a cow, first of all, a cow is not to be killed, not by a king. And secondly, I'm a woman, so also a woman is not to be killed under any circumstances. As I said, also the verses explain in the purports, even if a woman behaves sinfully, she is not to be killed, whereas a man can be killed then in a certain context in the Vedic time when there was kings like this. So let's not get this wrong for nowadays context. So she was running, and King Prithu angrily chased her with the arrows. And of course, there was no running from King Prithu. He was empowered. He was practically Vishnu avatar. And ultimately, she turned around and like, okay, kind of prayed to King Prithu, or at least started speaking to him about that he should not kill her because she's a cow, also she's a woman. And so in this way, she tried to, let's call it, get away. And King Prithu did not agree with her arguments like this. He said, there are two things you did that make you punishable, despite being a cow or a woman. He said, first of all, you disobeyed my orders. That means she was actually supposed to give food and herbs to the people, but she didn't. So secondly, he made an interesting argument. He said, you received the shares of Yakyas. So also Bhumi Devi is one of the goddesses. She was present when there were Yakyas, and they received their share. At the same time, he said, you don't give food grains to the world, which are you supposed to? So in this sense, you're actually a cheater, you're sinful. It is the duty of the earth to give foods, and as it is the duty of a cow to give milk, but you did not. So then the cow like further then argued on her behalf, explaining why she did so, and she argued that there are so many non-devotees or like non-godly persons who did just take from the earth but did not properly care for the earth as they are supposed to. So she decided actually to withhold all the seeds and the herbs within herself. And so in this way, King Prithu still was not pacified by that. Quite on the contrary, he remained angry, his lips trembled, and he threatened to kill her. And I want to read you an interesting shloka that gives another perspective on cows and cow protection according to the Vedic version. King Prithu says here in text 25 of the 17th chapter in the 4th canto, now with the help of my arrows, I shall cut you to pieces with your flesh satisfy the hunger-stricken citizens who are now crying for want of grains. Thus I shall satisfy the crying citizens of my kingdom. So here the purport says, here we find some indication of how the government can arrange for the eating of cow flesh. It is here indicated that in a rare circumstance when there is no supply of grains, the government may sanction the eating of meat. However, when there is sufficient food, the government should not allow the eating of cow's flesh, just to satisfy the fastidious tongue. It's a word I never heard, but this is how it is written. In other words, in rare circumstances, when people are suffering for want of grains, meat eating or flesh eating can be allowed, but not otherwise. The maintenance of slaughterhouses for the satisfaction of the tongue and the killing of animals unnecessarily should never be sanctioned by a government. Here, as described in the previous verse, cows and other animals should be given sufficient grass to eat. If despite a sufficient supply of grass, a cow does not supply milk, and if there is an acute shortage of food, the dried up cow may be utilized to feed the hungry masses of people. According to the law of necessity, first of all, human society must try to produce food, grains, and vegetables. But if they fail in this, they can indulge in flesh eating, otherwise not. This is, you hardly probably hear that. We always have this cow protection in the sense of never kill a cow. In this context, as we can see here in the verses from Prabhupada Maharaj himself and also from Srila Prabhupada, that there is a circumstance in which a cow could be eaten, and I remembered that in some DVDs of where Prabhupada footage was to be found, there were also some short interviews where Srila Prabhupada spoke with the cardinal or like different representatives of the church, of different churches. And there also, one of this was a French kind of priest, pastor, I don't know what exactly he was. And he said, he expressed his irritation or non-understanding of how can you not feed the hungry people in India meat, you know, if they starve, shouldn't kind of the human come first? And Srila Prabhupada then more argued, okay, lesser animals or other animals might be eaten, but otherwise it's more about getting food grains and so on. But here we hear that the cow has a duty actually to give milk, as the earth has a duty to give food grains and herbs and so on. And if she doesn't do so, she herself can serve as food, which might sound now drastic nowadays, since we're rather have mostly a viewpoint of that the cow is never to be eaten. I'm not inclined to eat meat. I'm just seeing there's a purport which clearly speaks that, and also Prabhupada Maharaj at that time handled it like this. So I think it's an interesting perspective. At the same time, we have certainly no need to eat meat, as it said in the purport. We have so much opportunities to eat, not just vegetarian, but even vegan. So there's certainly no need to consider, oh, could I eat cow meat? But just I find interesting the point, if the cow is not capable to maintain by milk, she's supposed to maintain, or can, by law of necessity, as Prabhupada said, can maintain by flesh. So that it's not that like in no circumstances ever flesh can be eaten, but there are rare circumstances in which this is sanctioned even for a cow. So just that's what we find there. All right.
Sorry, just a question on that. So is this why people, because I know I gave up drinking milk and dairy because, you know, dairy farms are really cruel, but lots of people, and, you know, there's devotees, you know, have told me, oh, no, you should drink milk. Krishna loved milk. But is that where this whole milk thing comes from? Or is it because obviously in Krishna, you know, when he was in Vrindavan, he was with the gopis and, you know, cows are very dear to him. Is that why that people, you know, Hare Krishna seem to love milk? Is that where that comes from? Or is it also to do with this whole sort of connection thing with the earth and the cow thing?
I would suspect that the earth and the cow thing, as we find it here, is not so much in the minds of devotees, rather than what you mentioned first, that since Krishna, like the love or like the strong inclination of Krishna to enjoy dairy products. That's also what Srila Prabhupada emphasized. There are so many mangal sweets. So in the morning, Krishna gets immediately sandesh and all these kind of things. So he eats a lot of milk stuff, since where he was appearing, or like this, the surrounding he chose was like with the villagers of Vrindavan, and the numbers of cows is unbelievable. What Nanda Maharaj has, kind of millions of, kind of, you can hardly accommodate where they would all fit, but there were millions of cows, obviously, and they supplied not just ample milk, but like so much it couldn't be consumed even by all of these people. So in this context, yes, it makes sense. Krishna likes a lot of milk. And this is probably where the tendency is also for devotees to have a lot of milk products. But let's not confuse here who is actually the enjoyer of the milk products. It's Krishna in the first place. And if all the devotees become big time enjoyers of milk products, it becomes a bit of an issue. Not just a bit of an issue, becomes ultimately a big issue. And it's also even not healthy. I also figured sometimes I really need to take quite a distance from it, because it makes a lot of mucus, and it's also in the Vedic traditional way of living. It's not common that you have every day or like so plenty dairy products, because if you would go traditionally, let's say in an agriculture country, where let's say hypothetically most people would have one cow at home. So how much milk would this cow give anyway per day? You know, a little bit, depending how she's nurtured. There's an interesting thing. We observed it also in Spain, for example, and I heard it from other places. We had been to Spain to the farm. There's one farm community, and they had 2 cows who since many years were giving milk. One never having given birth to a calf, which is amazing. So still she gave milk. One gave birth to a calf, but already long time ago, years, and she continued to give milk without that the calf was growing up. It was not anymore sucking the milk, which showed that the cow gives milk if properly treated, despite she is mother or not to a calf. It's the biological way. Usually, yes, they start, like the assumption is, okay, yeah, the cow starts to give milk when she becomes mother. But she can, it's just a fact. You have cows out there, if they're treated nicely, they give milk like this. So, but the key is that they're really treated in a loving way and cared for, and not just being products for consumption. That's a problem in our society. They constantly have to rape cows practically, that they become constantly pregnant, give constantly milk, but that's not the way it is supposed to be. So therefore, it's a good thing to rather restrain from milk products, have minimums. It's also not healthy to constantly eat milk stuff. I eat also way too much, actually, I must say. But yes, cows give milk also if they're not mothers, if they're treated with love and care. So, yeah, but
that explains, because yeah, because whenever this issue gets raised, and when you say, oh, when so anybody mentions, oh, you're vegan, or you're not doing dairy products because it's bad, these really devout devotees kind of give this example of no, Krishna loved cows and Prabhupada encouraged dairy eating. But I was just like, I'd happily drink, because I don't know whether you know or not, we've got a farm in the manor, Bhaktivedanta Manor, so they do ahimsa milk. So the cows are treated better. So I said, well, if I can find ethical milk where I know the cows are being treated to very high standards, then I'll have no problem drinking the milk. But any milk I get out of a carton is going to come out of a constantly suffering cow. So I was just like, yeah, that just kind of goes against all your ahimsa ethics, really, because it's just so cruel. But yeah, I was wondering where it came from, whether it was a pastime, or whether it's just because Krishna is associated with cows, whether, everybody's like, you should keep drinking milk because Krishna drank milk, or, yeah. So thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Yes. There was something I wanted to add with the whole cow and milk thing, but maybe it comes back later to my mind. All right. Yes, so Maharaj Prithu, in this way, it threatened the earth, and ultimately the earth was capable to pacify Prithu Maharaj. And as is described a bit later, I also would like to read you a few shlokas on that. Yeah, she actually He says, my dear king, not only are grains and herbs being used by non-devotees, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm not being properly maintained. Indeed, I'm being neglected by kings who are not punishing these rascals, who have turned into thieves by using grains for sense gratification. Consequently, I have hidden all these seeds which were meant for the performance of sacrifice. Due to being stopped for a very long time, all the grain seeds within me have certainly deteriorated. Therefore, you should immediately arrange to take these seeds out by the standard process which is recommended by the Acharyas or Shastras. This process means actually Yakya. Srila Prabhupada in the purports but more elaborately speaks on how Yakya is to be supposed to be performed. We hear it in the Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter, where this process of the Yakya cycle is explained. By Yakya, the demigods, or like rain, will come. From rain, grains will grow, and then from the grains, also another performance of Yakya can be done, and also people can be maintained. So in this way, the earth was willing to give, and at the same time encouraging the king to say, hey, but there should be performance of Yakya properly. Then she also said, my dear king, may I inform you that you have to make the entire surface of the globe level. Are you familiar with that? It's like kind of making it flat properly, like you have to balance it. The earth usually is said to have hills and like ups and downs, and he was supposed to level it. This will help me even when the rainy season has ceased. Rainfall comes by the mercy of King Indra. Rainfall will remain on the surface of the globe, always keeping the earth moistened, and thus it will be auspicious for all kinds of production. So after hearing the auspicious and pleasing words of the planet Earth, the king accepted them. He then transformed Swayambhuva Manu into a calf and milked all the herbs and grains from the earth in the form of a cow, keeping them in his cupped hands. So here it becomes a bit of a very symbolic, although not thoroughly symbolic kind of description. So because the cow is of course like giving, as a mother, giving milk to the calf. So this is also a symbol of the earth nurturing or maintaining the living entities on the earth. So also there are many verses now explaining how all kind of how to say species. The Manus are like a demigod, like he milked the cow and got herbs and grains from it. And then it is described that others who were as intelligent as King Prithu also took the essence out of the earthly planet. Indeed, everyone took this opportunity to follow in the footsteps of King Prithu and get whatever he desired from the planet Earth. For example, all the great sages transformed Brihaspati into a calf and making the senses into a pot. They milked all kinds of Vedic knowledge to purify words, mind, and hearing. So this is what they got out of the earth. All the demigods made Indra, the king of heaven, into a calf, and from the earth they milked the beverage soma, which is nectar. Thus they became very powerful in mental speculation and bodily and sensual strength. So and so on and so on. So many living entities are mentioned, how they used their representative to form, to transform this representative into a calf, and this calf was receiving the particular type of foodstuff from the earth in the form of a cow. So in this way, the cow nurtured just everyone accordingly, and this was very pleasing to the king. And this way, King Prithu made the earth again fruitful. Well, yeah, she gave what she was supposed to give, and he also then, it's described, he took up his bow, and then he performed the task of leveling the surface of the earth. And he smashed the mountains with his bow, and this way, what was kind of uneven became even, what was high became flat and low. So in this way, the earth was leveled, and then as the earth was requesting, the rain could stay on that surface of the earth longer and moisten it, and then in this way, things got back to a very productive, auspicious, vital environment, so to speak. So these are some of the pastimes of King Prithu. There's further description of how he performed also great sacrifices. He wanted to perform Ashwamedha sacrifice. So, but in terms of time, we rather approach the end. So are there any more comments or questions? I will also check on Facebook whether someone is there having any questions.
I've not seen any, Prabhu. I don't know whether.
All right. Okay. Well, then I would say we can also conclude here. Yes. If you like, yeah, as already mentioned, the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, King Prithu's activities are being described elaborately. So please, I want to encourage you. This is also the purpose of it, why we do all this Avatar series and other series, so that you might feel inclined, encouraged, inspired to absorb more in the books like the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and so on, and this way get all these wonderful pastimes of the Lord and connect in a deeper sense. What I wanted to add is, oh yes, this was something I wanted to add actually. This pastime is of course of a time which is not our time. You hear many pastimes of different ages and yugas, and we might wonder, okay, how is this applicable to us? And actually a very relevant consideration. And we don't have monarchy in our days. We have some monarchies on paper, so to speak. England has a monarchy, there's a queen. Spain has still a king and a queen, even Holland has. And there are other countries who officially have kings and queens and are monarchs. At the same time, they're republics and they have, there's a different arrangement. It's not a monarchy in a sense as it is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And also a ruler is not to be compared, or has not the autonomy or like the authority to do what, for example, King Prithu did, to simply just govern that sense. Of course, he had the Shakti, the power to just change all kinds of things drastically. And even the earth said to him, if you kill me, what will happen is the planet Earth, it will just fall into the Garbha ocean and everything will be lost. He was not impressed. He said, well, I, by my own mystic power, I can maintain the earth, no problem. So she had no leverage left because King Vishnu is maintaining all the planets. So this also shows, of course, a regular living entity has to compromise. It cannot just like kind of exhibit such a strength. But what is exhibited here is rulership or leadership. And leadership is something we all do also in our lives into a smaller or bigger extent. If you are a family person, if you have children, for example, like you are in a leadership position, you have to raise and you have to lead. But also in other types of relationships, you might be also in your work life, maybe you have a leading position and you have, that means you are in leadership, and it's about knowing the virtues that are needed to be an effective leader and like really serving the interest of, or the supreme interest of others, by making sacrifices, by leading also, of course, by example as much as possible. And this way we can always take inspiration and input by how did these people actually, or like these avatars, show us what is leadership. Of course, we must adopt it or adjust it to our capacities. We cannot just try to imitate it, certainly not. But the principle is become a servant of others, become a servant of Vishnu, and Vishnu empowers you to act and to lead. Empowerment does not come from one's own will or from one's own deeds. Vishnu has to empower one to act powerfully. There's a big important principle that we learn in our devotional life very early, like if you maybe have been to ashrams and lived in a temple, but also if you visit regularly, this is some important principle that actually also Srila Prabhupada manifested that, or like he lived that. He said actually empowerment comes from surrender to the Supreme Lord. So if I become a tool in the hands of the expert craftsman, then things can happen. if I'm a tool and think I'm a great tool, I can act independently from the craftsman, and I will not be of much effect. So that's an important principle of leadership, to be a servant in the first place of the Supreme Lord, and then also for the other living entities. So let's pray for each other and encourage each other that we may become better servants, and this way better leaders for the people close to us, for ourselves also leading we say also, you lead your life. Hare Krishna.